Hey everyone, welcome to Diary of an Anxious Therapist, episode 13 of season 1. I want to start this episode out by telling you a story. In the past, have done these as kind of introductions before the intro credits, intro, whatever you call the thing that you just heard. But I decided to switch it up a little bit today, and I'm going to throw this in here once we've actually started and got through that. So, let me close my eyes and kind of take myself back to this time. I remember a specific incident where I was sitting on the couch with my wife Tracy right next to me, and I was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. Heart was racing, my thoughts were all over the place. I didn't feel like I could catch my breath. It was not pleasant. For those of you who've ever had a panic attack and dealt with one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Thoughts were racing, tears were flowing, breath was fast, heart was pounding. Yeah, insert any unpleasant physical symptom here. I remember sitting on that couch and I remember Tracy sitting down next to me and her putting her arm around me and starting to rub my back and just with like her fingernails, just rubbing my back and giving me a hug and telling me that it was going to be okay and that she loved me and that she's there and I'm not by myself and I'm all right. And I can remember in that moment, it took a little bit of time, but I can remember in that moment as I started coming down from the peak of that panic attack, my body starting to relax. I started feeling a little bit calmer. I started feeling that anxiety lessening, and it really helped to have her there with me. Just her touch and knowing that she cared, it made all the difference in the world. It pulled me back from that ledge. So we've talked about my anxiety out here before, and you may be wondering, okay, why are we talking about this again today? This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm wanting to give you some really concrete tools on this episode that might be helpful. So this is going to be, while it relates to first person, like I say that all of my podcasts, I always try to do it from a first person perspective because it's my story that I'm hoping you can learn from and maybe get some benefit from. I'm also going to do a little bit more of the putting on the metaphorical teacher hat today, which I've never been a teacher in my life. So this is going to be an interesting one. I did do training in corporate America in the past, so bear with me here. This is a little bit of uncharted territory, but this is also kind of a peek behind the curtain of things that I do with my clients in session when I'm working with a counseling client or with a coaching client or something like that. So that is all to say that today we're going to talk about finding and utilizing your anchor. So with an anchor, there's a lot of things that could be thought about that. I guess maybe when I just throw that word out there and pausing for a drink of coffee for those of you just listening and not watching. And yes, this is my new favorite mug that my wife got me. She's awesome. If you can see the inside of it there, and it's got all the cats that look like mid-century modern cats. So two of my favorite things in the world for my favorite person in the world. So an anchor. Obviously, maybe the first thing you think of when you think of anchor is it's something that weighs a boat down. It's something that you throw over the side of a boat. Weighing it down sounds kind of like a negative connotation. But think about what the actual purpose of an anchor is. An anchor in that term, and I am not a nautical person by any stretch of the imagination. As I may have mentioned before, I can barely swim, hopefully well enough to keep myself from drowning if I ever fall off a boat. But what does an anchor do? It steadies that boat. It keeps that boat from floating off. It keeps that boat in a static, stable place. So when I talk about an anchor, what I'm referring to is an anchor that can anchor you and bring you into this present moment and bring you back off of that metaphorical ledge, or keep your boat to stay with the nautical theme, because I'm cheesy like that. Keep your boat from drifting off into uncharted, unknown, scary, stormy, swelling waters. So, an anchor, I started with that story for a reason. That's a very specific instance of an incident that happened in my life. And that's something that's very committed to my memory, that moment of coming down off of that panic attack and off of that cliff and that feeling of my wife being there and caring for me. And so what an anchor is, what I'm talking about today from a psychological perspective, is a memory or feeling that you can recall in detail that you can really lean into and it can really help you feel safe and grounded and loved and okay. So, when I say that you can recall in detail, it doesn't have to be something that happened when you were a small child. It doesn't have to be something that happened today. I'm jumping a little all over the place here from my outline, so I don't know how long this one's going to be today. We'll see. But what it needs to be is it needs to be a memory that you can call upon when you felt safe and when you felt loved and when you felt cared about and when you felt like you mattered. And it's more than just a memory in the psychological sense. It's also a physical thing as well. So, and I say so a lot. I just realized that. I'm saying so a lot today for some reason because I'm feeling a little bit off my game today. And in the interest of full transparency, it is about 8:15 in the evening, which is much later than I usually record these. I had a weird kind of off day today, so I'm feeling a little bit off today. So that's why I'm a little all over the place, I guess. Don't know why I felt the need to explain that other than I felt the need to explain that. So cup of coffee or drink of coffee number two. Yes, at 8:15 at night, I know that's not the best decision when I'm going to need to go to sleep here in a couple hours, but I like warm drinks when I'm recording my voice. So there we go. So now that we've talked about what an anchor is, a memory that you can recall with utmost detail, that you can really lean into the feeling that you felt in that moment. What makes a good anchor? I kind of touched on this just a moment ago. This is something that makes you feel safe, feel loved, feel seen, understood, and cared about. So that story I told right at the start with me and the panic attack and my wife sitting on the couch, that is an anchor that I go to and that I have committed to my memory frequently if I start feeling anxious or I start feeling overwhelmed because I remember in that moment how I felt, and that helps center me and ground me and talk me off of that metaphoric ledge. Are there limitations to an anchor as far as what you can use for an anchor? Not really, not from my perspective anyway. It can be a childhood memory. Maybe you remember when you were a kid and I'm just going to throw random examples out here, you were learning to ride a bike and you remember that your parent or sibling or someone was right there with you and running right beside you with their hand on the back of the seat of the bicycle or something like that. And you felt safe in that moment and you felt like you were okay and they were protecting you. Maybe it was a memory you have with a grandparent or a parent or something like that, or a friend. Maybe it's something more recent. Maybe it's something that's happened in your adult life or something happened in the recent past. But the whole point of it is it's something that is a good memory that makes you feel safe and makes you feel loved and cared about. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a childhood memory. It doesn't have to be a spouse. It doesn't have to be a parent. It can be anything that lets you tap into that feeling of being safe and secure and okay and loved and cared about and knowing that you're okay. So, with an anchor, while this is a great tool to use for these type of things, whether you're someone that struggles with anxiety or if you're someone that's struggling with whatever, if it's social anxiety, if it's like nervousness getting up to give a speech or something like that, whatever the case is, anytime you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, this can be a useful thing. Like many things and many techniques and many ways that we learn to soothe ourselves in these ways, it takes practice to be able to do this. If I sit here and you listen to this podcast and I tell you to pull on a memory from when you felt safe and loved and cared about. And you don't do that except for the next until the next time you start to have a panic attack, if that's what your struggle of choice, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. That's always the joking way I describe anxiety for me. It's probably not going to be extremely effective because it's more of a mental construct that's in your head that's just telling you this is the thing that I should do. What you need to do, what we all need to do with this is we need to really ingrain this in not only our mind, but in our body as well. So, what I'm saying is you need to practice this. So, how can you reinforce this anchor? How can you strengthen it? How can you make it a better place to go to when you need to in these moments? And I want to make it really clear when I'm saying to go to, that isn't saying that you're ignoring the feeling that you have. We'll talk more about that towards the end of today and moving into next week. So there's going to be a second part of this podcast, something else that goes along with it. But it needs to be something that you're intimately familiar with and something that you really, really feel. So, how can I reinforce that? How can I really make that something that's really more than just a mental exercise? Here's how I do this, and this is how I train people to do this as well. So I'm not going to follow all the steps because obviously I'm explaining it and I am looking at my outline here and I don't want to forget something. But what you want to do is you want to close your eyes to start with. You want to visualize the set and the setting, which means the mindset or the way your mind was feeling, and the physical setting, what was going on in that moment. Try not to think only about the memory of what was happening that you felt safe and loved and cared about, but try to really go into the feeling of how you felt in that moment. If you felt safe and you felt loved and you felt cared about, if you can set with that memory and pull that memory up now, really visualize as if you are in that moment again, that that's happening. What do you feel in your body? Does it feel warm? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel your breath slowing down? Do you feel your shoulders kind of loosening up where they're not up here right at the bottom of your ears tensed up, but where they're slow and calm down a little bit? Do you feel that your heart's not racing as much? Do you feel just good, just warm and safe inside? Once you have that memory and once you have it identified and you have become familiar with that process of the memory and what it feels like, what you need to do is you need to practice upon calling on your anchor then. So what I would recommend is to take a few minutes each day, maybe first thing in the morning when you wake up, when you're sitting in bed, that's perfect. When you first wake up in the morning, your mind isn't covered by 9 million other things. It's still kind of a little bit of a tabula rasa, a little bit of a blank slate, or maybe right before you go to bed at nighttime. But take a few minutes each day, close your eyes, pull up that memory, sit with that memory, and I'm doing it right now, sit with that memory of sitting on the couch and knowing how anxious I felt and how I was having a full-blown panic attack and how overwhelming it felt. And then just to illustrate by walking through the process for me, remember my wife putting her arm around me and hugging me and rubbing my back and telling me she loves me and that it's okay and that I'm safe and that she's here with me and that I'm not alone. And when I sit with that memory, you may even notice I feel a smile start to come up on my face. And I just naturally feel my whole body just kind of, it's like everything just exhales and relaxes. So that's what I want you to do. Take a few moments each day and practice this. First thing you need to do is you need to identify what is this memory, a memory that you felt safe, loved, cared for, and cared about in. Close your eyes, visualize that memory, imagine it as if you're in that moment right then. Then identify what did it feel like in your body to feel cared and loved about and feel like you were safe, like everything was okay. And once you recognize that feeling, really sit with that feeling and really engage with it and really allow yourself to feel that as if You are in that safe place right now where that person that loves and cares about you is right there with you, and that you're safe and you're not overwhelmed, and that everything is okay. With this practice, I don't want to say practice makes perfect because nothing's perfect, but my silly little pithy thing I put here on the outline is that practice gives you power. The more you can practice this, the easier it'll be to call upon this anchor and use it when you need it. So put it into practice. Make this part of your daily routine. If you're someone who struggles with anxiety, if you're someone who struggles with negative self-talk, if you're someone who struggles with negative thoughts, if you're someone who struggles with stress, this can be used for a lot of things. But start this first part of this process of identifying your anchor and really getting familiar with that anchor so you can go to that place in that moment when you need to. Practice it every day for a few minutes every day. Now, that obviously probably brings up the next question of when should I use this? What is this good for? And I gave my example of having a panic attack and that sort of thing. Or now, realistically, when I'm feeling stressed or anxious, how I can go to that place. It can be used for a lot of different things, though. We're going to get into that more next week. And yes, I am being a little bit of that annoying person that's dangling the carrot in front of you and saying, tune in next week because you'll learn more. But I don't want to put too much into this one podcast. I want to give you one tool, one thing that I think is very helpful and that I've seen help a lot of people, including myself. And I want you to practice that and get really, really familiar with that specific tool, that specific thing, that anchor. Next week, we'll talk more about a second process that you can use this anchor as a entryway into working into tougher feelings and working through rephrase working with and being with those tougher, more overwhelming feelings. So that's it for today's episode. So it feels like it's a little bit shorter. Once again, I don't have a timer going, so I have no idea how long it is. I think we've been going about 15 minutes. I don't know. I guess we'll see when it gets uploaded and we see what the total length is. But drink of coffee again. And as the mug says there, I love you very much. Yes, I'm all about the cheesy pounds. So, as always, as I end all of my episodes, I wish you nothing but love, peace, and happiness in your life. And from the part of me that's eternal to the part of you that's eternal, I say namaste and be well. Love you all. Take care, everyone.